What would your life be like if you couldn't read? That's a reality for many, but one group is changing that. Details are next. Welcome to Our Issues, Hampton Roads. I'm your host, Rae Pearson. Imagine for a moment what life would be like if you couldn't read or write. Many of us take literacy skills for granted, but there are over 750 million illiterate people in the world that cannot read a single word, and more than 2 billion individuals who struggle to read and write a sentence. Reading is essential because it develops your mind and leads to an understanding of knowledge and life lessons. It helps you understand the world around you better, keeps your mind active, and enhances your creative ability. Low to no literacy can make everyday tasks a struggle, make you feel marginalized, impact you psychologically through depression, as well as lead to poverty and crime. But where there's a problem, a solution is possible. Representing all district reads is the executive director, Gary Anderson, and the executive assistant, Mike Dillender. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for joining. Can you tell me about All District Reads and how it came to be?
Well, All District Reads is just 3 years old, and during COVID, I'm a retired school psychologist, worked in public education for 37 years, started out as a science teacher, and I was floored that in my class, about a third of my class could not read the text.
And what age group was this?
This is middle school science, and had given up. I asked them to study for the test, they didn't study. I just didn't know how to handle that. Mm-hmm. So I became a school psychologist, and I started working with these children, particularly in primary school, because in middle school, the game was over. Turned out that the front line was primary school, and it became much more than a job. It became a life's mission to help these children be successful in school. Everybody, every one of them has to go to public school or private school. They have to go through school. And if you can't read, like you said in your introduction, if you really can't read the textbook, tell them to study for the test is like, doesn't work. So over COVID, this was my third nonprofit, but I was...
You're busy.
Yes. And I started the first one back in 1999, the second one, and then I was out of it, but I couldn't get them off my mind. So I started third nonprofit, and that's rolled over into All District Reads. And it is by far the most exciting nonprofit that I've ever developed.
Mm-hmm. So you both are leadership for this organization.
Yes.
Now, I know that you said during COVID and you were like in the midst of it, so you saw what actually was the issue. But what made you jump out there and forge forward in this area rather than doing what most people do, is see an issue and then wait for someone else to solve it?
That's a good question. No one else that I know of is doing this, going after these children. Let me back up a minute. In 1995, I was a school psychologist, and the Hart-Risley study was published. I'd been working in education since 1972, but I really couldn't figure it out. I wanted to figure out how come these children, particularly those children raised in poverty, were just bombing out. They weren't doing well. And the Hart-Risley study came out in 95.
That is a question for me, Gary, that initially you really came to this conclusion teaching middle school students.
Yes.
And then you discovered that it's during that primary time that they weren't learning. What is happening or not happening during that time?
That's a great question, and that's why I went back and became a school psychologist. How come this is happening? And then the Hart-Risley study came out, and that Hart-Risley study said children raised in poverty are exposed to approximately 12 million words before they get to kindergarten. Children raised in more in middle-class families are exposed to 25 million words. Children raised where there's a college graduate are exposed to, on the average in America, 42 million words. And so all of a sudden, it was boom, chakalaka, I could see it. It was a 30 million word exposure gap in the home.
Wow.
So that was the problem. So now, in the late 90s or middle 90s, I had an idea of what was going on. And somebody came into my office, and somebody had put in a copy of the Read Aloud Handbook by Jim Trelease. And I read that book, and basically Trelease, he was a sports writer in Massachusetts. He did some research on this because he got into the same thing. How come so many children are not successful? And he found out if you read chapter books to them in the home, like Charlotte's Web, that it's really investing the language, it's investing the stories, and because it's in a good story, you know, the children say, read the next chapter. What happens next? They get hooked on the story.
They're more thirsty.
Yes,
for it.
they get thirsty. And then while they're being thirsty, they're also developing the language skills. They're developing what you're doing right now, questioning, listening and questioning, which is a prerequisite for learning to read. You learn these foundational skills in your home. It's called family literacy, and that's a foundation for all the other literacies. But if it's not happening in the home and you get to school in kindergarten and you haven't been exposed to this, your foundation is so small that you really can't build your house of literacy. You just give dumb looks like, what's going on? And I don't know that vocabulary word. So it's a process that happens, that has to happen with all children. And if it's neglected, they fail, you know, simply put.
Now, I just feel like I hear your passion dripping out of your mouth. I can see it all in your face, and I'm sure you got Mike into this too.
Yes.
So why did you guys think it was possible for you to tackle this tall problem?
I think the big thing, you know, Gary just recruited me about 3 or 4 months ago. That I'm the newcomer to the organization and everything, but listen to Gary's passion and also the stories that he has, and then the evidence of everywhere he goes and does this and pulls it off, the numbers go up, the test scores go up, and it's irrefutable. We were just talking to somebody in Norfolk who had been with the Hampton schools, and she had founded the program there pre-COVID. And she said that the first year, the SOL scores went up 7% across the board,
wow.
3rd, 4th, and 5th grade on average. And then the second year of doing this, they went up another, it went up 14%. And that was just in Hampton. So we know this works. We know the value of it. You know, I think what Gary has done, and, you know, he's really humble, but he was mentored by Jim Trelease, who wrote the Read Aloud Handbook. And what Gary has come up, there's been many different organizations that have tried to pull this off before, but what they've done is they've created just a book distribution. You know, I could throw a book at you and you might throw it back at me. What does that do?
Right.
You know, but what we're getting after is the approach and the methodology to actually put this into practice and make it work to where there's incentives, the school board, their leadership, we have the buy-in, we have the training, we have the approach, we have the methodology. Everybody's rolling in the same direction, and guess what? Families start to read, scores go up, and I just think of it another way, just to add on to what Gary said, is that can you imagine, you know, 30 to 40% of the homes in America, the children are raised in an environment where they probably have never seen a book until they show up to kindergarten.
Well, let me stop you there. We're going to actually go to a break, but we're going to talk about the initiatives and the things that are really changing people's, I guess, thoughts, households, and promise. All District Reads is using community champions to take this initiative far beyond books. Hear how. That's next.